I spent years doing free repairs for my in-laws. Never complained. Then one day, my father-in-law said, "You're just cheap labor with a wedding ring." My wife smirked. I said nothing. The next weekend I vanished, and her best friend sent her a photo of me at a resort with someone she never expected. I, 34M, grew up with nothing. Not the kind of nothing people say when they mean they didn't get the latest PlayStation. I mean actual nothing. My mother raised 3 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment with a ceiling that leaked every monsoon season and a landlord who never picked up the phone. By the time I was 12, I could fix a leaking pipe, patch drywall, rewire a broken switch, and replace a busted lock. All because nobody was coming to help us. That's not a sob story. That's just context. Because what I learned in that apartment became the thing that everyone around me eventually wanted a piece of. I became an HVAC technician after trade school, worked my way up, got licensed, started pulling decent money. Not doctor money, not lawyer money, but honest, reliable income that let me buy a small house and put something aside every month. I was proud of that. Still am. Then I met my wife. She came from a family that had money, not generational wealth, but comfortable. Her father owned a chain of dry cleaning stores. Her mother hadn't worked in 15 years. They had a big house in the suburbs, 2 cars in the driveway, and the kind of confidence that comes from never worrying about a bill. When we started dating, I could tell her parents weren't thrilled. Her father looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on a nice shirt, something that could probably be dealt with but shouldn't have been there in the first place. Her mother was polite but distant, always asking my wife if she was sure about this, if she'd thought it through, as if marrying a tradesman was the equivalent of a financial downgrade. But my wife told me she didn't care about any of that. She said she loved me for who I was, not what I earned. And I believed her. God help me. I believed her. We got married 3 years into dating. Small wedding, which her parents made clear they were disappointed about. Her father pulled me aside at the reception and told me he expected me to take care of his daughter properly. That she was used to a certain standard. I nodded and told him I'd do my best. He didn't look convinced. The request started about 2 months after the honeymoon. Her mother called one evening and mentioned that their kitchen faucet had been dripping for a week. My wife handed me the phone, and I told her mother I'd come by that weekend. Took me 40 minutes to fix. No big deal. Her father didn't say thank you, just nodded from behind his newspaper and muttered something about it taking long enough. A week later, their garage door opener broke. Then the guest bathroom toilet started running. Then the porch light shorted out. Then the dryer started making a noise. Then the basement had a moisture problem. Every single week, there was something. I never said no. Not once. I'd show up on Saturdays, sometimes Sundays, with my tools, and spend 2, 3, sometimes 5 hours fixing whatever needed fixing. I replaced their water heater one winter, a job that would have cost them $1,500 if they'd called a professional. I rewired half their basement when they wanted to convert it into a home theater. I installed a new garbage disposal, patched their roof after a storm, fixed their fence when a tree branch came down. All free. Every single time. My wife never once told her parents to hire someone. She never once said maybe I needed a weekend off. She'd just relay the request, like she was forwarding a work email. And I'd pack up my tools and go. I started keeping a mental tally after the first year. By year 3, I'd done work that conservatively would have cost them somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000, probably more. And in those 3 years, her parents never once offered to pay me. Never once bought me dinner as a thank you. Never once acknowledged that what I was doing had value. But the thing that really got to me, the thing that sat in my chest like a slow-burning coal, was how they treated me outside of the repairs. At family dinners, her father would make little comments, jokes he called them. He'd ask if I'd washed the grease off my hands before touching the good china. He'd tell stories about his business, and then look at me and say something about how some people build things, and some people just fix what's broken. Her mother would smile politely and change the subject, which was her version of agreeing. My wife never defended me. Not once. She'd laugh along or stay quiet, and when I brought it up on the drive home, she'd tell me I was being too sensitive, that her father was just like that I needed to let it go. I let it go. For years, I let it go. Then came the barbecue. It was a Saturday in late June. Her parents were hosting, and most of her extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. I'd spent the morning fixing their sprinkler system because her father had mentioned it wasn't reaching the back flower beds. Took me almost 3 hours in the heat. I finished, cleaned up, and joined everyone on the patio. Her father was holding court at the grill, talking to one of her uncles about hiring contractors for some renovation work at one of his stores. I was standing nearby, drinking a soda, not really part of the conversation. Then her uncle turned to me and asked if I could take a look at the project, maybe give them a quote. Before I could even open my mouth, her father laughed and said I was just cheap labor with a wedding ring, that they didn't need to hire me because they already had me for free. The patio went quiet for about half a second. Then a few people laughed, nervous, uncomfortable laughs. Her uncle looked away. Her mother sipped her drink and said nothing. And my wife? She smirked. Not a full laugh, not a gasp of shock, not a look in my direction to check if I was okay. A smirk. The kind of expression that said she agreed, but wouldn't say it out loud. I stood there. The coal in my chest that had been burning for 3 years finally caught fire, but I didn't say a word. I finished my soda, helped clean up after the barbecue, drove home with my wife, and went to bed. She never brought it up. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. To her, it was just another Saturday. But something in me had shifted. Quietly, permanently. I spent the next 2 weeks acting completely normal, went to work, came home, ate dinner, watched TV. When her mother called about a squeaky door, I told my wife I'd handle it, and I went and fixed it. Smiled, drove home, said nothing. But during those 2 weeks I made a phone call that changed everything. See, there's something my wife and her family never knew about me. My mother, the woman who raised us alone in that leaking apartment, had a younger sister, my aunt. She'd married well, moved away when I was a kid, and we lost touch for years. But I'd reconnected with her about a year ago through one of those random social media messages. Turns out she'd built a very successful interior design business, lived in a beautiful lakeside house about 4 hours from us, and had been trying to find our side of the family for years. She was warm, funny, sharp, and genuinely interested in my life. We'd been talking on the phone every few weeks, and she'd invited me to visit multiple times. I'd never gone because weekends were always taken up by my in-laws' repair list. That changed the Friday after the barbecue. I told my wife I was going on a work trip, a training seminar, a few hours away. She barely looked up from her phone and told me to have fun. I packed a bag, loaded my car, and drove to my aunt's place. Her house was stunning, right on the lake, with a wraparound deck and floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd converted part of the property into a small boutique resort. 4 guest cottages she rented out to vacationers. The whole place looked like something out of a travel magazine. Hugged me like she'd been waiting her whole life for me to show up, and told me she was glad I finally came. We sat on her deck that evening, with the lake turning gold under the sunset, and for the first time in years, I felt my shoulders drop. I didn't even realize how tense I'd been carrying myself until I was somewhere no one needed me to fix anything. We spent hours talking. Not small talk. Real conversation. She told me about building her business from nothing after her divorce. About the years she spent being underestimated, because people looked at her and saw a single woman with no degree, not someone with vision and grit. She asked about my life, my work, my marriage. And I told her everything. The repairs, the weekends lost, the comments at dinner, the barbecue, the smirk. She listened without interrupting, didn't check her phone, didn't try to make excuses for anyone, just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. Then she told me something I'll never forget. She said I'd inherited my mother's hands and my mother's heart, but I didn't have to inherit her silence. She told me my mother spent her entire life being useful to people who never once appreciated her. Working double shifts, fixing things for neighbors who never returned the favor. Saying yes when she should have said enough. My aunt said she'd watched her sister disappear into other people's needs, and she wasn't going to sit by and watch me do the same thing. The next morning, my aunt introduced me to someone. A woman she'd been mentoring. A young contractor who was starting her own renovation business and needed advice from someone experienced in HVAC and general repair. My aunt had mentioned me to her, and this woman wanted to talk about a potential business collaboration. We spent the whole day talking. Not flirting, not anything inappropriate. Just 2 people who understood the trade, understood what it meant to build something with your hands, and understood what it felt like to be underestimated. By the end of the day, we'd sketched out a rough plan for a partnership. She'd handle the contracting and design side, and I'd handle the mechanical and technical installations. My aunt offered to invest seed money. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me. Not as cheap labor. Not as the guy who fixes things for free. Now here's where it gets interesting. My aunt's resort was a known spot. Beautiful, photogenic, the kind of place people posted about on social media. And that Saturday afternoon, while my aunt and I and this contractor were sitting on the deck reviewing plans, someone at the resort recognized me. Not me specifically, but they recognized the situation, because this someone was a woman who happened to be my wife's best friend's cousin, who was staying at one of the cottages for a weekend getaway. She saw me on the deck with an older woman and a younger woman, all of us laughing, looking relaxed, looking like we belonged there. She didn't come over, she didn't say anything. She just took a photo and sent it to my wife's best friend. The best friend sent it to my wife, and my wife lost her mind. I got 17 missed calls in 2 hours. When I finally picked up, my wife was practically screaming. She demanded to know who these women were, why I was at a resort when I was supposed to be at a training seminar, and what the hell I thought I was doing. I stayed calm. I told her I'd explain when I got home. Then I hung up. When I walked through the door Sunday evening, my wife was sitting at the kitchen table with her arms crossed, and I could tell she'd been crying. She demanded answers. I sat down across from her, looked her in the eyes, and started talking. I told her the older woman was my aunt, my mother's sister. I told her she was successful, kind, and had a beautiful property on a lake. I told her the younger woman was a contractor I was potentially going into business with. I told her nothing inappropriate had happened, not even close. I watched her face shift from anger to confusion to something like embarrassment. But I wasn't done. Then I kept going. I told her I'd spent 3 years being her family's unpaid handyman. I laid it out. Every weekend, every call, every job. The water heater, the basement rewiring, the roof, the fence. The sprinkler system I'd spent 3 hours fixing in the heat. The same morning her father decided to call me cheap labor in front of 30 people. I told her I'd added it up once, conservatively, over $12,000 in free work. I asked her if she knew how many hours of my life that represented. I told her that her father had humiliated me in front of her entire family, and she had smirked. I told her I'd never forgotten that smirk. I told her it played in my head on a loop every time she handed me the phone with another request from her parents. I told her I was done. Not done with the marriage, not yet. But done being the family fix-it guy. Done spending every weekend at her parents' house. Done being the punchline of her father's jokes. Done pretending it didn't hurt. My wife went quiet. Then she did something I didn't expect. She started trying to minimize it. She told me her father didn't mean it that way, that it was just his humor, that I was overreacting. She said I should have told her how I felt instead of sneaking off to some resort. I asked her when, exactly I should have told her. Because every time I tried, she told me I was being sensitive. Every time her father made a dig. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. She told me I couldn't charge her own parents. I told her I absolutely could, because I was a licensed professional, and my time had value. She called her mother. Her mother called her father. Her father called me directly. First time he'd ever called me himself. He told me I was being ridiculous, that family doesn't charge family, and that I was letting my ego get in the way. I told him family also doesn't call family cheap labor at a barbecue. Then I told him the offer stood, $85 an hour, or he could call someone else. He hung up on me. For the next 2 weeks, the house was tense. My wife alternated between cold silence and passive-aggressive comments. She told me I was ruining her relationship with her parents. She told me I was being petty. She told me I was changing. I told her she was right. I was changing. Update 1. The fallout was faster than I expected. Her parents hired a plumber for their AC issue. Cost them $400. Her father complained to anyone who would listen that I'd become difficult and ungrateful. That one hit different, coming from a man who'd never once thanked me. Meanwhile, my business plans with the contractor were moving forward. My aunt put in the seed money. We were to start the LLC. I started taking on side jobs in the evenings, building a client list. The work was different now, not because the tasks were any different from what I'd always done, but because every job ended with someone handing me a check and telling me they appreciated the quality. It sounds small, it wasn't. After 3 years of being invisible, being valued felt like stepping into sunlight. Within a month, I had more work than I could handle on my own. I brought in a helper, then another. Word of mouth spread fast, because we showed up on time, did the job right, and charged fair prices. Everything I'd been giving away for free to people who mocked me was now building something that was mine. My wife noticed the extra income. She also noticed that I wasn't available on weekends anymore. I was working, real work, paid work, work that people appreciated and compensated fairly. She asked me one night if I was happy now, and for the first time in our marriage, the answer was honestly yes. Her parents' house, meanwhile, was falling apart without me. Their garbage disposal broke again. The basement theater started getting moisture issues. The fence needed repainting. All the things I've been maintaining for free were now costing them real money, and they were furious about it. Her mother called my wife crying one afternoon, saying they'd spent almost $2,000 on repairs in a single month, and asking why I was doing this to them. My wife relayed this to me like I was supposed to feel guilty. I told her they were spending what they should have been spending all along. That what they were experiencing wasn't punishment, it was reality. Update 2. 3 months after the barbecue, my wife sat me down and told me she wanted to talk. Really talk. She admitted she'd never stood up for me. She admitted the smirk was real, and it was wrong. She said she'd grown up watching her father belittle people, and she'd normalized it to the point where she didn't even see it happening to her own husband. She asked me if we could fix this. I told her I didn't know. I told her the smirk had broken something in me that I wasn't sure could be repaired. I told her I still loved her, but I didn't trust her the way I used to, and trust was the foundation of everything. She cried, I didn't. I told her if she wanted to fix this, it started with her parents. She needed to tell them, clearly, directly, not through hints, that what her father said was unacceptable, that I was not their handyman, that I was her husband, and I deserved respect. She said she would. And to her credit, she did. She drove to her parents' house the next day and had a conversation I wasn't part of. When she came back, she told me her father had gotten defensive and her mother had cried. But she'd said what needed to be said. Her father didn't speak to either of us for 6 weeks. Update 3. It's been about 8 months since the barbecue now. My business is doing well. We've got 3 employees and enough contracts to keep us busy through the end of next year. My aunt comes to visit every few weeks and treats my wife with a kindness my wife's own parents never showed me. The contractor I partnered with has become a close professional ally, and we've built something I'm genuinely proud of. My wife and I are in counseling. It's slow. Some sessions are harder than others. There are days where the therapist asks me to describe how the barbecue made me feel, and I have to stop talking because the anger comes back so sharp, it surprises even me. It's not just about the words her father said, it's about the years of small cuts that came before. The jokes, the looks, the silence from the one person who was supposed to have my back. The smirk was just the moment I finally bled enough to notice. But there are also sessions where I see my wife trying, really trying, to understand what she allowed to happen. She told the therapist once that she never realized how much damage silence could do, that she'd confused keeping the peace with being loyal, and that she was only now understanding they weren't the same thing. I didn't say anything when she said that, but I felt it. Her father eventually broke his silence. He called my wife and asked how I was. She told him I was doing well. He asked if I'd come fix their bathroom fan. She told him no. He was quiet for a long time after that. Last week, something happened that I didn't see coming. Her father showed up at my business, just walked in, looked around at the office, the tool racks, the client board on the wall. I watched him from across the room, waiting. He walked up to me and stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who'd rehearsed something in the car, but couldn't quite get it out. Then he told me the place looked good. He said it like it cost him something to say it, and maybe it did. He looked around one more time, nodded slowly, and I could see something working behind his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe just the realization that the guy he'd been laughing at for 3 years had built something without him, in spite of him. I thanked him. I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't ask about the house. I didn't try to make him comfortable. He left without asking me to fix anything. That alone said more than any words could have. It's not forgiveness. I don't know if I'll ever get there. But for the first time I think he saw me. Not as cheap labor. Not as a joke. Just as a man who built something. And that, honestly, was worth more than any apology he could have given. I'm still healing, and still angry sometimes. But I'm not silent anymore. And I'm never fixing another thing for free. If you've read this far, thank you. I don't know what happens next with my marriage. I don't know if the counseling will be enough, or if some things, once broken, stay that way. But I know this much. I know my worth now. Took me 34 years and one smirk to figure it out, but I got there. And that's mine. Nobody gets to take that from me again.